we try to solve a problem, and there is no solution without a big problem. And to be honest, when always a problem starts with an anecdote and a small story, and a small story can make a big story. Um, and if I can tell you the story of Cyril and Sébastien, who built at the really early beginning PAZZI, and back in 2013, it was one of the reasons they were still at school, in their engineering school. And when they were finishing, their class around 3 p.m., not everything was closed. They wanted to grab some food, but at 3 p.m. around Paris now it's okay, but when you are just in the suburb of Paris, all the restaurants are closed. If you want to have, maybe just have a few fast food which are open, but honestly, the food was not good. And so they say, okay, and they are engineers, are inventors, and they just say, okay, let's do something about it, Why we should not have a robot who could do the cook, really by providing quality of food anytime during the day. And like that, you don't get any problem of availability. So it started like that. And when I met them, they told me, Philippe, help us to build a pizza business which offer, thanks to robot, good food any time of the day. Oh, I am a French entrepreneur. Born in Paris, 3 kids, and I always like complex challenge all my life. I had, 3 steps in my life. I was in the B2C business, very far away from automation, and we'll discuss about it probably in a couple of minutes. But I started my business career as an entrepreneur, then moved to a multinational, and then came back to entrepreneur life through robotics. And there is probably a red link onto that, which is the fascination for complexity, difficult challenges. And I don't know, always my kids tell me, why you do go still on difficult task? I like difficult things, so it's what should define me.
So I want to go for how it all started. You said that 20 years ago started your own business as entrepreneur, and then you wanted to L'Oreal. I think I don't know how many years you worked there, but
for 10 years.
Yes, I'm curious about the starting point, and then going to multinational company, and then going again to robotics here. But can you tell me about this transition? Was it easy, or was it intentional, or what did you learn, or give you something inside from being entrepreneur and working for multinational? I'm curious about the whole experience in all these years.
Yeah, so entrepreneur has always been the thing I wanted to do since I was a teenager. My fascination was for people who could change things in our societies through the power of economy and the power of what we call business, which is the link between people making things with organization and people. So that was always fascinated me, that. So it was very clear for myself that I had to be an entrepreneur. Then my first experience was in the B2C. I built a company, then I closed the company. All of a sudden, there was a proposition from L'Oreal, and I told myself it could be an opportunity also to move in a giant organization, leading one, super powerful, and having the experience of an international job right away. So it's what I did, and I did it quite well for 11 years. But the last job I was based in Hong Kong, and I told myself, I always told myself, you need to quit a job when everything is fine. So everything in my career was doing very well. And I told myself, okay, that's not the time to take a new risk. And I was 45 years old, and I said, let's do something else. And at that time, I was approached by a VC, family office and VC, who wanted to invest in the field, and they wanted to me back to France in order to help them instead of making investment in the cosmetic industry, because I was very good in the cosmetic industry. And it's what I did for 1 year. So I left Hong Kong. I dismissed from L'Oréal. And for 1 year, we investigate with the investing team to invest in startups, in the new ecosystem of startups. So that was a very interesting challenge. And all of a sudden, two guys came. It was after 6 months in the job, and they said they created the first restaurant with robots cooking pizza. And I say, oh, well, what is it? And I really fall in love with the project. It's something, which only happens once or twice in your life, where something's call you and tell you you have to do it. I didn't know nothing about food, nothing about automation. I don't have any background of engineer. It's important to know. I'm very a business guy, very business oriented, but I don't have any background. So let's see if for the people who listen, you can still work on robotics even if you are not an engineer. There is some possibility to do it. and so I left the VC after 6 months, after 1 year, to join this startup, and to all of a sudden change totally my career into a new field, and then we'll come back to that experience. But and after 7 years of this wonderful experience, I again ended last year's, to do a new experience, which was not a startup experience, to come back to entrepreneur life into what I call a normal company. I don't know how to quote them, because today everybody's talking about startup and startups, but there is also a possibility of creating value and creating company which are not startups. It's what I did since January, and really investigating in the field of pure robotics and automation and vision.
And what's the difference between normal company and startup? Because it's not clear now. What do you mean, normal company and startup? Is it a difference? Like some differences?
Yeah, it's a big difference. Yes, a startup is a company who is presenting a project to VC. So the first resource of finance is equity from investment companies, not banks, and not the business that you generate. It's very important. So very often, in order to grow, you need to get money from venture capitalist companies. The model is very often on something which is innovating, and with the promise of getting very high incomes in a period of 5 to 10 years, very high incomes. So that's the pure model of startups. When you are creating a company, normally you're supposed not to, and my challenge was to survive day one by not getting any money from the outside and generating money from the work I was doing day one. So this is a big difference, and otherwise people are the same. The amount of risk is different, because you are betting on the startup on something which is probably have a higher level of risk. Keep in mind that probably 80 to 90% of startups fail after, in the first years, which is not supposed to be what I don't know how to call them, normal company. That's not the good name, but SMB we call small and small business size company, small and medium size.
Before delving again in your journey in the entrepreneurship here, I want to ask you maybe in retrospect, when you look to working for multinational company for 10 years, do you sometimes regretted that why didn't do that earlier? Like, I'm just curious, do you have this kind of thought why, or this was something maybe gives you more insight about the market? Because I'm curious about the market here, the robotics market, maybe that's a discussion we'll handle, but do you sometimes regret that you didn't start this earlier? Like you didn't spend 10 years or?
No, because as I told you, when I left L'Oréal, I was very good. My career was doing very well. I was in traveling a lot, doing a lot of things, very exciting. The mobility was very high in this company. The quality of talents was amazing. I was meeting people who are very talented people around the world, and for any nationality, very open. So that was an amazing adventure. And so no regrets, I think, and that's why I left when it was. Could have regret if I left it when it was bad, but I left it when it was a very good time for me. I could have stay more, but just when something call you, something appeals that you want to do it, you have to do it, and because that's what I did. So no regret. And I had a very good learning. Working in a multinational allow you also to have the capacity of working in complex organization. A startup or a small company is not a complex organization. It's an organization of 5, 10. With PAZZI, we were 30 people. That's it. So it's not a lot. When you work in a multinational, you work with the complexity of countries, the complexity of vertical, horizontal, or organization. I had also the ability to have a very international job, to understand how you work with people with different nationality, different backgrounds, and this is a huge asset. And when I need to discuss with a large company, for my company, when we build, we design robotic solution, we have our first clients are huge company. I have a good capacity to talk to them because I know I've been there. I know how it is.
So I want to go for the most important part here about the robotics market, especially based in Paris here. And you told me that when you have the experience that's the first experience you had about the idea, and then you started, this is what I have to do as a CEO for the first company here. Can you tell me how you think about the good ideas? Like, because some people say, oh, it's interesting, the robot serving me, like if we're going to your new company now. But I'm just taking an example here about the idea itself. How you make sure this is really worth the investment or not, because some ideas, just as I said, it doesn't survive. And can you tell me about what the criteria you balance your mind? Oh, I have to do that because XYZ, or it's not always like clear to you, there's no clear indication.
Yes, I mean, you have two ways of conducting a business. Whether you do a full analysis, which takes months and months and months in order to be sure that what you do will be possible, and then once you get all the green light, you move on. Whether you do that and you just reach 50% of the green light, 60% of the green light, and then you move on. And I'm more on the second position. I tell you why. Because when you start to create something which is unique and totally unknown, when we started when I joined up the project of PAZZI, it was first as an investor in 2016. The company was already had 3 years of existence. They were building something which has no past. There was no at all any comparison on the market. There was no business model associated. There was no technology that has ever been able to do what they were doing. So you could do all the study you wanted. I mean, it was super impossible to say that it's going to work. You never know. The only things that really is a difficulty, but is probably the most important thing in a business adventure, is with who you are working with. I always take this example of this famous, management teacher called, I think I remember, Jim Collins, who was saying in a good business it's like a bus. Make people get into your bus, select well the people to get into your bus, and then drive your bus, because the road is going to change. And effectively, what you think to do on a certain year will change in 3 years' time or 5 years' time. What you need to have is the right people with you in order to have the capacity of changing first, and have the capacity of saying, okay, we are not going to the right direction, let's move in another direction. And that's the most important. So the best asset is not the technology, it's not the business, it's the people you are working with. And it's a long process, because it's difficult to recruit the good people. It's difficult sometimes to dismiss and to quit to avoid certain people. And it's a long journey. But probably the best advice would be that: be careful with who you work and try to find the best people. Best people are not necessarily experts, because an expert is going to do what he has to do, and a certain level of your company you will have to change. And sometimes people don't like to change. So having, qualitative people capable of agility, and being open-minded not only to what their task is, their mission, but to the global mission of the company is something difficult to find. So, and because when we started the PAZZI business, I was not sure. I had a huge feeling. There was, of course, some fundamentals which were very, at that time, very important, like the difficulty to recruit people in the restaurant industry, the difficulty but to get, a stable employee. The cost of labor was very high. The fast food industry was not serving good meals, was very like junk food. So this was very correct, but the way we process could have been different, and why you choose to do as PAZZI we did it, which was an entertaining robot and not a back office robot, was just because we felt it was the right thing to do. There was no study. You cannot afford when you're a startup to do a study. And even if the study is right, I've seen so many studies wrong.
That's interesting. I can't agree with those words. But when you start now the new company, I'm curious about the name because the name is quite interesting. Sananga. Can you tell me what does this mean? The name?
Oh,
Uh,
Sananga.
yeah.
Sananga, yes, it's an interesting story. Sananga it's a medicine plant coming from Amazonian
Mm-hmm.
forest, in the
Yeah.
South America, which helps the tribes when they hunt in the dark to see better. So it's little drops that you put on your eyes that helps
Mm-hmm.
you to have a better night vision
Okay.
for
Okay.
hunters. And
Interesting.
at the same time, it gives you a better abstract vision. It's clear your mind in order to see better what are the possibilities. So I told myself, if you want to design automation robots for the cities and industry of tomorrow, getting the right vision is good.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
some guys all about vision.
Okay. Something new to learn. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So maybe before going more about the company, but can you tell me about the market because that's what I perceive. But I'm curious from your long experience. It seems the market's a little bit of a challenge. I don't know. The robotics market is not exist. I don't know how this situation for you, especially in Paris. Yeah, there are a company, but can you tell me about how the culture, how people are accepting the like robots in their daily life? Do you see there's a gap, or you don't feel that since you work with different? I think in multinational company you have experienced different things, but the startup
Yes.
or the company you're based in a certain location and you have to deal with people and how they're accepting for technology. Can you tell about the challenges and how it's so accepting now to robotics?
So for the moment, funnily enough, in France, we have a culture of of contradiction. So in a certain level, we have probably one of the great engineer, people who really have the capacity of engineering some things, designing, even, if you look to artificial intelligence, most of the US company try to recruit some French people for making the new generative AI and all this complexity, chat GPT and so on. So a lot of the good engineers are coming from France. At the same time, if you talk to population, they're going to fear robots. Robots are associated to turnover, they are associated to loss of jobs, and so on. And even so, you give them some data. It's funny that the country who has the most intense level of robots are the ones who have the lowest unemployment rate. It's funny, it's like a contradiction. More you have robots, less unemployment you have. So, but even so, people have difficulty to think about it. So, in a way, French people like robots when they are in the industry. When they don't see them, they know they are buying goods. They know they are get by robots. At the same time, they want to hear about it. And I give you a funny story back 20 years ago, when which is give you the idea of the problem we have, not probably in France, but you may have that in Belgium as well. when in 20 years ago in supermarket, in hypermarket, they started to have, the automatic cashier, cash machine, where you could put your goods and pay automatically. So 25 years ago, we were saying that the woman and the man who was working as a cashier in supermarket was a very bad job, very annoying job, very, non-value added job, because people were just doing that and that, this movement all day long. It was super bad and it was not a good job. All of a sudden, 20 years ago, we put automatic cash machine, and all of a sudden they say, oh, that's the most marvelous job, because people were feared they were losing their job. So there is always a contradiction between when something happened, and especially when you see it. And I think people like robots when they are in the factory, they can't see it, because like that, they don't have to think about that. Then there is another topic about robots, which is more an anthropological topic, which is robots are good when they look machines and they don't look like humans, like humanoid. And I think Western countries, it's not the case of North Asia, are not ready to get a robot who looks like human, like humanoid, and which I think is. I don't think it's the appropriate choice. First, I don't think why robots should look like men or women. That's I don't see any interest in that, but that's another fear of people.
So may I ask you about the risk company? What kind of use cases that you did, or like solution, or can you tell me about
Yes,
the
yes,
things? Yeah.
yeah. It's very linked to the experience we had with PAZZI. What happened with PAZZI is three things, in fact. Once we started to develop robots, I call it robots for the cities, which means that robots that have an application inside your city, not in industry, that could serve, that could be in location where you have a lack of labor, because people were leaving the restaurant industry because of the job were very tiring, very difficult hours, difficult tasks, especially in the fast food industry where you repeat your gesture every day the same. So I think there was an emergence, with especially that was pushed by the COVID, of people leaving the service industry away, and the necessity of finding a solution to replace the people who were leaving from that job. So that was the first point. The second point, with the COVID, especially every country mostly started to have the necessity to have an industry back more local. So industry in a lot of area, textile, many other area, were far away for the center of where people were using the goods or buying the goods. And you had long supply chain, especially the products were built in countries that, the countries like India, China, where the carbon index is very high, so generating a lot of energy cost, and with long supply chain and with a lack of independent economic independency. We find out with the COVID that if you depend for your production of masks or your production of any products of other countries, you're getting weaker. So that was another sign for me to say, okay, there will be a trend in the years to come to have back the industry in each country. So that was, and we saw a lot of program in France, in other countries, of reindustrialization. The problem of reindustrialization is not only a question of money. It's not just buy robots, put the robot in a factory, and it will work. You need, if industry went far away from the Western countries, it means that they were doing things that robots were not capable to do. Like if you look to the textile industry, while textile industry is in Tunisia, in Turkey, or Far East, it's because labor cost is very low, and because we cannot automate this task with robots. So I say, okay, this is another sign. Let's do something about that. And the third thing, I found out that very often there is a need of innovating in the robotic field, in the industry, And if we could offer a service to the industry factories in order to push them to more innovation, we could find a way. So these three elements were very strong for me, and that's how we position Sananga in order really to design robotic solution, not for big factories, robotic solution for sectors where very depending of labor and where you have difficulty to automate. Because the core of the business of PAZZI and Sananga is really to be inventors of solution and not to apply existing solution. They are much better company than what we do if you have to existing solution and to apply. We need to invent the way how to automate textile. We need to find a way how to automate food processing, a lot of things. So that's exactly the positioning of the company.
So when you talk to like client, for example, here, how you convince them? Because sometimes I'm not sure how they're accepting about to automate the process, for example. If there's certain criteria to ensure that the whole process will be automated, if there is something very crucial to deliver the story and just to convince it that should be automated.
Yeah. So first we address our offer to clients who have really the will to make industry back in their country. So they want to do it. It's a corporate, at a top corporate level. They tell to the operation, let's rebuild factories in France or Belgium, whatever. And then the question is how you do it. So then where we come. So first we come to address people who already have a need. Secondly, we have the past of PAZZI, which has been probably very awarded as a company, very noticed as our capacity to do things which are super difficult. In few words, PAZZI, we put automation in a few meters square, probably 250 sensors. We put Industry 4.0 in a restaurant, very small. We put automation in minus 20 degrees. We put automation in plus 400 degrees. So we did so much in automation related to very difficult tasks that the awareness is quite good when we talk to people. It's like it's like your CV. My resume is, I've done PAZZI. Okay, let's talk about it. And then usually what we do is we do a little study to start to show them that we can crack the technological problem. When the technological problem is cracked, is solved, then we start the long study of building the solution, the prototype, and so on. So we just prove that we can be able to have this capacity. So that's why when we recruit people, we need to recruit people who are not only great engineers, but people who have the super open mindset, being capable to invent new solution. That's the whole story with PAZZI. It's more a story of inventors than a story of engineers.
You operate only, the solution based on locally in France or also internationally?
So we propose a solution in France, but of course, once the first products by the end of the year will be out, and we can propose them to new clients. We can be based in all Europe. And what we are doing now as well, we want to establish in a subsidiary in the company, so it should be done by the end of Q3 in the UAE, where we think there is a high demand. The same issue as we find in France, country who have really the vision to build robotics in their home country and not outside of their country. So what we are interested in is really to investigate countries who have this vision. So that's why we're opening a subsidiary over there.
Okay, great. I like when you stress about the innovation part, not only engineer, and I think that's so clear in PAZZI and what you do now also. But I'm curious about the idea as well to be catchy and interesting, like having the robot and the interacting with public and still there's safe limit. That was clear. I think that was a part of innovation, but there's part of criticism, like, why you do something like that? I'm just telling you, there's part that's really interesting. And I think it's also, I think it's when you're being new, I think, and different, I think that's a great level of attention, which is needed. I believe in that. So, but there's part that why you do that, like the humanoid robot thing. Why we need humanoid robot? You see this kind of counter arguments or criticism. Why you do what you do? Yeah, it's catchy, it's interesting. But why?
Why? So when we did, you are talking especially about the PAZZI project.
Yeah, and yes, and also because you now we're dealing, I think maybe I don't know what other use cases could be pop up in the now. I know it's maybe you can share with the details, but in general also, yeah.
Yes. Um, First, we try to solve a problem, and there is no solution without a big problem. And to be honest, when always a problem starts with an anecdote and a small story, and a small story can make a big story. Um, and if I can tell you the story of Cyril and Sébastien who built at the really early beginning PAZZI, and back in 2013, it was one of the reason they were still at school, in their engineering school, and when they were finishing, their class around 3 p.m., not everything was closed. They wanted to grab some food, but at 3 p.m. in around Paris now it's okay, but when you are just in the suburb of Paris, all the restaurants are closed. If you want to have maybe just have a few fast food which are open, but honestly the food was not good, and so they say okay, and they are engineers, they're inventors, and they just say okay, let's do something about it. Why we should not have a robot who could do the cook in really by providing quality of food anytime during the day, and like that you don't get any problem of availability. So it started like that, and when I met them, they told me, Philippe, help us to build a pizza business which offer, thanks to robot, good food any time of the day. That was the first pitch. It's a simple story. How it's a simple story became a big story? It's with the pandemic. With the pandemic, we had the world, not only France, had so much problem to recruit people. Employee in restaurants were leaving. We were talking about 200, 300,000 people leaving the restaurant industry in France in 1 year. It's massive. 1.5 million in the US. Then you had the restaurant industry, which was struggling because at the same time, people wanted to go to the restaurant. So the need of having a restaurant experience is still here, but there was no employee to fulfill the need. Then you say, okay, my small story, which is a simple story of I want to do good pizza with robots, I'm going to transform it in a big story of my solution is going to solve the problem of the fast food industry. And again, that's why when you ask me the question of do you do a study, you can do all the study, but if you want to feel your own internal deep conviction, it's always start with a personal story. It's always personal. And when I joined them, I was working. I did, as I told you, work for 11 years in L'Oréal. In L'Oréal, every year they were innovating, 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 innovating. But disrupting an industry is totally different from innovating. And when I told myself, okay, these two guys, they want me to join them in their pizza business. Okay, let's do it. How often you can be part of a story that is going to change probably an industry. It's a new trend. I wanted to do it. I wanted to be part of it. It's fascinating.
It is fascinating. I like when you say innovation because
Yes,
the innovation and disruption, and using the disruption part because of absolutely something out of the yeah. I mean
out of the
it's
box.
yeah, and not traditional. It's just not orthodox ideas. I think
Yes.
having a robot to make a pizza.
How I can define yes, I could define innovation in other words. And you say, when I say innovation, it's what I call the problem of the better sameness. If the better sameness is you do better, but exactly something which is already existing. You just do it better, You just improve it, from a car who can, you're just improving the machine or what. This is not what I call, disruption of innovation. Disruption is not innovation. It's not something just better, just something totally new. And when you can be part of such a journey, just do it. It's fascinating to do that. But it's so risky. It's super risky adventure. But okay, but you should be yourself at risk from time to time.
Maybe the best one about the risk because that's a part I think it's very not easy. I mean, it's easy to say that, but in reality, it's super super hard to jump into unknown and just to uncertain situation and the risk, which is inherent nature in the entrepreneurship bar. But how is your
Yeah.
relationship with the risk? Like, I don't know, but yeah, sometimes you have to calculate like a safe margin. If something bad happen, I still have this or this, like backup plans. But for you, how do you think about the risk, since it's something new?
Okay. So first, if you are risk adverse, don't be
Mm,
entrepreneur.
okay.
uh, uh, if you think your project will last 1 year or 2 years, just double it. If you think your project will cost you 1 million, just double the amount, because everything you think is not going to be true. And
Mm,
and you need to be prepared of that. It's really a journey which is super difficult, emotionally speaking. You really go
mm,
through all your emotion. I always say you're like in an elevator of emotion all day long. Just the good news is make you super happy. Bad news make you really bad, and so
mm,
it's a difficult journey. When I talk about risk, I always say, always when we talk about entrepreneur, they need to be resilient, they need to be strong. But there is something probably people don't mention very often, which I always mention, is you need to be in a certain way unconscious. If you are totally
interesting.
rational,
Yeah.
you are not going to do it, to be honest, because you just take the statistic. If you 90% of startups fail, why should I start?
Mm,
I am a genius? Not, you're not a genius. You're probably somebody fantastic, but you're not a genius. I'm not a genius. So I'm just super resilient, and I have other quality, but I'm not a genius. So 90% of startups fail. Just knowing that, you should not start. So you need to believe in yourself. You need to believe in that you are capable to do a long journey with people and achieve it, knowing that probably you're gonna fail. And so you have a part of yourself which is totally unconscious.
wow. I like this word.
In French, it's called the insouciance. I don't know how you call
Insouciance.
it.
J'ai parlé français, là,
Insouciance. Ouais, en français.
Oui,
How
j'ai
you
parlé
would
français.
translate insouciance?
Uh,
Let me find out. I find because
okay.
it's a typical French word.
Yeah.
Insouciance. Um, insouciance. I don't know. No, we don't
Consciousness.
call it.
Consciousness, is that mean?
Yes, yeah. Carefree,
Carefully. Okay. Okay.
careless, careless.
Yeah. Yeah.
A bit of careless. Yes. Otherwise, you don't move. I mean, because and I saw those people when I was working in a big corporation. Typically the guy who complain, he say, "Oh, I'm going to do my own startup because it's never good," and they don't do it just because they are scared. You should not be scared. I mean, I don't fear. I have no fear. I mean, to be honest, I have no fear. I put myself a lot in danger, financially speaking, and it's not easy. It's not an easy life. But if you start to have some fear, don't do it. Do something else. There is fantastic jobs in plenty of fields, but just don't be an entrepreneur if you fear.
I absolutely agree with you. I think that's really wise words. And it's a case, you're right. Maybe I want to ask you deep down, what do you feel, Philippe? I mean, do you feel fulfilled since it's risky and it's stimulating? But deep down, what is the feeling you have compared to just being the safe net? And is this fulfillment? What is actually the feeling when you venture in a new business
Oh,
here?
okay. 1 year ago, 2 years ago, I had an interesting conversation. I was invited in a debate with a bank who wanted to discuss about entrepreneurship. Your entrepreneurship, which means that you're being an entrepreneur inside a big corporation, and they wanted to get kind of feedback from myself. What is an entrepreneur, especially because I've been working in a big company. It was especially very challenging in L'Oréal. They push you to be proactive and so on, and act every day, which is not always the case when you work in a bank, which is a very stable world. So they wanted to get my opinion, and I told them, you could do whatever you want, you never be entrepreneur. It's not the same as entrepreneur, never. you know, because in this big corporation they tell you, oh, you're going to be the guy. I give you a business, just do it as if you were your own entrepreneur. Just the guy knows he will be paid at the end of the day. Me myself, I don't know if in 1 year, 6 months I'm going to be paid. I'm going to fail, and what will happen to me? Um, last year when it ends, no more money, no more cash, no unemployment benefit, nothing. You get naked, and the feeling of danger is very strong, and not has nothing to do with when you are working at a big company. Because even if you take risk and you fail, you be paid. You're going to be paid, and if you are not being paid, you're going to be on get the unemployment rate and a lot of things. So the notion of danger is not at all the same. But the opposite, when you win, when you succeed, you have the feeling of, even if it's a collective, it's always a collective word. I will never say I succeed. I will always say we succeed or not. But you get into yourself the power of succeeding much stronger than in a big corporation. Back in my previous company, where I was the big one, when we were succeeding, it's not only we, it's where 1,000 people succeeding. So of course, when 1,000 people succeed, the feeling of success is a bit diluted among 1,000 of people, because you're just a portion of it. When you win with your team in a startup or a small company, you just have the feeling you did it, just do it and you did it. So you feel much stronger. And the other also element is the element of freedom. So the freedom, it really depends your level of governance. If you're in startup, you have big investors, or if you have your own company, the level of freedom can change. But the capacity of doing what you want to do to get to the point with a lot of freedom is very positive for me.
I do appreciate this point. You are to the point and very honest about these things. So I do appreciate it. Maybe if you could lift, can you tell me about the thing that you think, maybe especially from robotics market? I assume, of course, you're following the humanoid robot announcement by multiple companies and these things. Do you think it doesn't make sense that we have the things, since you focus more in there is a problem I'm trying to solve, but it seemed the current announcement based on just like this is trend or hype. What will, you know what I mean? Just how do you see the market and when certain companies producing the same exact idea, like humanoid robot, Tesla figure, this announcement? I don't know if you following up this announcement by having humanoid robot by every single company.
The production of humanoid.
Yes, humanoid robots. So, do you think it makes sense that we have this investment in things that still we are not sure if it will solve a problem or not?
Okay, that's funny because today we are working with as a partner with a startup, big one, that has put in place a new type of robots called enchanted tools. I don't know if you're aware of them, but on the web, just type auditors, and their vision of robots is to avoid the humanoid in order to move to the character. And they say if you want to get in a relation with a robot, you will never get in a relation with a humanoid. It's going to be because it's too much a distraction and perturbance between who is it real or not real, and it's get it better with a character. So what they do, they have designed a real character, it's called Miroki, and that is capable of grabbing, socializing, and moving. It's a very fascinating robot. Just this year did their kind of coming out, in the market, and we are their partners
But it
for
seems interesting, the approach. Yeah.
Yeah, they have a very social anthropologist approach of saying that if you want to get a connection with a robot, you need to have empathy. In order to have empathy, you need to be a character, somebody coming rather from another world, having his own history. If you move to a kind of humanoid, it's difficult, and that's why I was telling you, people have a better relation with machine when the machine is a pure machine rather than a humanoid, and humanoid create confusion. I think for my understanding.
Yeah. Final question for you. What are the things you aspire to do in your life? Since you love entrepreneurship, and it seems that's something you all want to do, but the thing is still you want to achieve in your life. Like this is the goal or a dream.
So now I totally, in a way, so when I create Sananga, and so I'm talking about professional life, huh? Although as personal life, I want to be happy as everybody and have time for myself. I want to run the marathon very fast, and that's my personal life, but and eat good food. But for the rest, for my professional life, I would say now I have the capacity of being my own. I have a partner, coming from the PAZZI adventure. We are two, two partners for the Sananga team, and so the ability really to install the culture of the company on my own. It's very important to put this culture of innovation and really to design not only the robotic solution by the company organization as I want to do it. And of course, I'm very worried about two things. I'm worried about the state of the planet and how we can challenge what will happen to the what's happening now with the planet. And I'm very worried. So what I'm hoping is, again, by designing things to try to tackle the problem with the clients more and more often, and also, which I don't know which is the case in Belgium, but we have the case in France, is there is not enough women in the tech companies, robotic companies. It's very, very low. And I think the same, and we need to balance it much more. So I have really the goal to have a much balanced organization between the genders, which always say, I told to my kids, I had 50 years old last year, and I told to my kids, you have two things to think if you want to have a better future. Think about the planet and fight for women. That's the two most important things in your life, if you want really to have a better world in the future. So, and the rest, you will do it.
You are a good father. That's
Thanks.
that's amazing
Thank you.
to skip these things. Um, I don't know if you have any final words, or let's say people listening, any final words. Let's see.
No, Marwa, I was super happy to have this conversation. I hope people will enjoy. And if there is any possibility to answer questions when the podcast will be out, I would be very super happy. And again, if people want really to create, they want to join us. You can leave our contact details. We're going to be super happy to recruit exciting people.